Despite Moscow's hollow denials, it is now clear that Russian troops and equipment have illegally crossed the border into eastern and southeastern Ukraine. This is not an isolated action, but part of a dangerous pattern over many months to destabilize Ukraine as a sovereign nation. We condemn in the strongest terms Russia's continued disregard of its international obligations. We urge Russia to cease its illegal military actions, stop its support to armed separatists, and take immediate and verifiable steps towards de-escalation of this grave crisis.
Ask any military strategist, and they will likely tell you the words Russia and lies have gone together like borscht and vodka over the generations. Whether blatantly communist or trying to act like something the other side of a dictatorship, what emanates from the mouth of Russian and or Soviet leaders can almost universally not be trusted. And just as if we were back in the 60s all over again, the world is experiencing a Russian bear deja vu when it comes to war and invasions. Once again, the world seems to be playing a soft shoe with the madman in charge. Let us lay out these strategic facts as we welcome back to MidPoint Senior Fellow at the London Center for Policy Research, formerly a proud member of the United States Army, and author of The Last Line, about a terrorist organization using the American southwest border to prep for a mass casualty attack. It's now out in paperback. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Lieutenant Colonel, always a pleasure.
Ed, thanks for having me. Good to be on.
We're going to talk about ISIS in a moment, first of all, though, and the Russians. But let's talk about, first of all, what has happened in the United Kingdom today. They have raised their terror threat level to severe. What exactly does that mean? Does it tell us that they truly believe something is imminent?
This means they're taking it seriously, something that apparently we're just not. It is extraordinary, Ed, that you see one of our key allies taking prudent steps to secure their people. You see their leader coming back off vacation, looking at the issues. And let me be clear here. This is the funny thing is, I'm in contact with Muslim folks in London constantly based on some other work I do, and the Muslims who are thinking Muslims understand that this is a real threat. And so what you see here, Ed, is that this threat is so severe, and part of it is they've added to it. The English folks, the Muslims there, the British government understand that radicalized Muslims from London, from England, are moving in. We have the same issue here, Ed. Our president does not wish to internalize that or start looking internally. As you mentioned in the introduction, there's folks from Minnesota who have been killed over in northern Iraq and Syria. I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the ISIS folks who either went and came back or being self-recruited right now in the United States, and we're not taking it seriously.
Is it simply possible, and again, here comes that devil's advocate
Sure.
again, that the president and the administration is trying to tamp things down, not create a panic, and therefore when they say, we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't know whatever, they're simply just bluffing at that point publicly?
Oh, they're tamping things down, Ed, but it's all because of political narrative. I spend a lot of time, as you know, we've talked about this on Capitol Hill, and I'd like to believe very good military contacts. And right now, the best way to summarize the White House policy is we don't want to do anything. They are being given options for both domestic security. Friends of mine met with FBI Director Comey recently on some of these issues. The Special Operations Command, Central Command, they're all pumping. I mean, we're talking about fire hose level information going into the White House. The problem is this: you have a bunch of 8-year-olds parading around in Brooks Brothers suits pretending to be the National Security Council. And for whatever bizarre reason, they don't seem to internalize that there are real threats, both domestically and foreign, that we have to start dealing with now. And I'm sorry, this whole Josh Earnest explanation that, well, the president misspoke. No, it's true. We don't have a strategy. Strategies have been recommended, and they continue to pretend that everything is just fine, and it's all about a political narrative.
Let's go ahead and turn to what's happening in the Ukraine right now. I'm going to go ahead
Sure.
and read a comment from Vladimir Putin. You'll be able to hear it. The viewers will be able to see it. This is Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, today at a meeting with his supporters at a youth camp in Russia that the Ukrainian operations are reminiscent of the Nazi siege of Leningrad during World War II. Quote, small towns and big cities besieged by the Ukrainian army, which is directly shelling living quarters with the aim to destroy infrastructure, suppress the spirit of those who fight against them. You know, even though it is very sad, it reminds me of the events of World War II when Nazi German occupiers, fascist German troops laid siege to our cities. For instance, Leningrad. You're from St. Petersburg, right? So they laid siege to our cities, to Leningrad, and were directly shelling cities, killing their residents. It has to be insulting to so many people on so many levels to hear Putin go back and use World War II and Nazi atrocities as a background here, when in essence, the atrocities certainly are beginning on Ukraine, and certainly this is, as many people would call it, a simple invasion.
A nibbling invasion. This is not a D-Day type 250,000 man invasion, but it is an invasion nonetheless. It's a slow motion one designed to push a little by little. Clearly, Ed, this whole World War II analogy stuff. The Soviets were as bad as the Germans. It's just we didn't know till after the war how bad they were. And the fact is this: Putin will say and do anything he can to get the attention off of what they're doing. And he knows, and we've talked about this, and we'll probably continue to talk about this. They will continue to push. They will do this in slow motion. They will take the knife and just slowly push it in until someone stops them. And that's the issue. No one's there to stop them. And as much as I appreciate the NATO's strong words recently in the introduction, they're having a conference in England within the next couple of weeks. That conference was supposed to be about the future of Afghanistan and Pakistan, not Russia. But at this point in time, it's very clear that Putin will continue to move forward like a bully. If you and I were standing in front of each other, Ed, and I pushed you and I pushed you and I pushed you and you didn't push back, I'd keep pushing. And that's what's going on here. Putin will continue to push until someone stands up and says enough's enough, and someone with credibility and the ability to say we're not going to allow this.
If we look at what he is using this for and what he is trying to gain, let me just throw something out here in all these different scenarios. The Russians want Crimea. It is important to them. But in order to get to Crimea, they have to make sure that they continue to supply it. They put troops in there. They take control. If you are to look at the southern border of Ukraine on the ocean, would it not to you make sense of what they're trying to create is a land bridge from Russia to Crimea to basically get their troop movements, to get all of their supplies moving, and maybe that is a good reason why what they're doing in the south?
It's an intermediate step. I agree with you. I think that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to secure territory, which will give them some level of comfort. One of the traditions of Russia, going back before pre-Soviet Union Russia, is that they've always felt that they need buffers. They need land to make sure that they are secure, that they can basically dominate their area. It is clearly a 19th century concept, but one which they're executing. As much as President Obama comments about how outdated these concepts are, it's not to the Russians, and that's who we're dealing with. So we have to understand that Putin will continue to consolidate gains, will continue to expand his gains. And if I were the nations which joined NATO after 1999, which includes Poland and a number of the other Baltic states, I'd be a bit worried right now. This is not going to stop until someone stands up and says enough's enough. And Ed, one other quick factor, Europe at this point is not, because they depend on Russia so greatly for energy. There's going to be a great reluctance from Germany on over all of Western Europe to do much against Putin at this point in time.
With about a minute left here, what then is the next logical, strategic, military step to take?
Well, for Putin,
no, for Americans or for the European Union or for NATO?
All the above. First off, we need to redefine what our strategic interests are. President Obama had an opportunity yesterday to not only address ISIS, but to address the world. President Reagan was great about stating what our interests were, and then being able to match resources and capability to those. We need to do that now. We need to understand that we have a leadership role. We cannot depend on others to do it. And as much as NATO could do things, we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we have to lead them again. And I'm not saying we have to be the boots on the ground either in Europe or in northern Iraq or Syria, but we have to lead.
Just about 10 seconds here. I need a quick answer from you here. How do you, and I would imagine that possibly you laugh like many others when we hear that the Russians on the ground are there as unofficial troops or they're there as volunteers. Russians don't do anything unless they're told to in the military, correct?
To quote a line out of one of the movies that Tom Clancy wrote, that Russians don't take a dump without a plan.
We've all seen The Hunt for Red October, and Fred Thompson delivered that line perfectly. And why did I know that you're going to go there? Because it's perfect. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, always a pleasure, my friend.
Sir.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
All right, take care. Later this hour, the 25th anniversary of perhaps the most controversial punishment in sport since Shoeless Joe Jackson, and a lesson about personal responsibility. That and a whole lot more coming up right here on MidPoint, where we question everything.